The Israel-Hamas war, a battle not just of territories, but of ideologies, religion, and survival. It's a conflict that has shaped the political landscape of the Middle East for decades, and yet, the stakes have never been higher. Today, this conflict remains one of the most intense and volatile in the world. But how did we get here? What drives this ongoing clash between Israel, a nation backed by formidable military strength, and Hamas, a militant group operating from one of the most densely populated strips of land on Earth? To understand, we must dig deep into the roots of a war that has lasted generations. The story begins decades ago, long before rockets flew over the skies of Tel Aviv or Gaza was ravaged by bombings. The conflict's roots trace back to the early 20th century, when tensions between Jewish and Arab populations in the region began to escalate. With the founding of Israel in 1948, a new chapter opened in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Palestinians were displaced, borders were drawn, redrawn, and disputed. Years of hostilities followed, but the creation of Hamas in 1987 brought a new and more dangerous dimension to this conflict. Hamas emerged during the First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli rule. Its founders had a clear, unwavering goal: the destruction of Israel. Hamas did not just want political autonomy for Palestinians, it wanted the eradication of the Jewish state. And they were prepared to go to any lengths to achieve it. Armed with weapons and an uncompromising ideology, Hamas quickly became the dominant force in Gaza. And then the rockets began to fly. It started as sporadic attacks, but what began as small-scale skirmishes soon spiraled into full-scale warfare. By 2008, the Israel-Hamas war had escalated into a cycle of violence that continues to this day. Every conflict, every confrontation has left devastation in its wake. The Gaza Strip, only 41 kilometers long and 6 to 12 kilometers wide, is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Imagine living in a place where every day you hear the rumble of jets overhead, the roar of rockets launching, and the terror of air raid sirens. That is life. That is life for the people caught in the crossfire of this relentless war. Israel, facing constant threats to its security, responds with overwhelming force. The Iron Dome system protects Israeli cities from a barrage of rockets, intercepting missiles before they can cause widespread damage. But for the civilians in both Gaza and Israel, this is no game of strategy. This is survival. The real question is, where does this end? Each flare-up begins the same way, a spark. It might be a political dispute, a violent protest, or an event in Jerusalem. Then, the rockets start. They rain down from Gaza, indiscriminate, deadly, aimed at Israeli cities, towns, and civilians. The Iron Dome intercepts many, but not all, and Israel responds. Swiftly. Precisely. Airstrikes target Hamas leaders, weapons caches, and underground tunnels. Gaza's skyline lights up with explosions, and in return, Hamas vows revenge. The cycle repeats over and over. Yet behind every rocket, behind every airstrike, lies something deeper, a struggle for control, not just over land, but over the narrative. Hamas positions itself as defender of Palestinian rights, while Israel insists it has the right to defend itself from terrorism. Both sides, locked in this dance of destruction, refuse to back down. International powers watch, but can do little to stop the escalation. Ceasefires are proposed, often brokered by neighboring Egypt or Qatar. But how long do they last? Hours? Days? Eventually they crumble, and the fighting resumes, more violent than before. And as always, it's the civilians who pay the highest price. In Gaza, the destruction is catastrophic. Homes, schools, and hospitals lie in ruins. Families are left without electricity, clean water, or medical supplies. Israel, too, suffers, with citizens forced to seek shelter underground as sirens blare and rockets fly. It's a brutal reality that neither side can escape. But why? Why does this cycle of violence seem endless? To answer that, we must look beyond the battlefield and into the heart of the Middle East itself. This isn't just a war between two groups. It's a conflict with deep religious, historical, and political roots. For Palestinians, it's about ending the occupation and achieving statehood. For Israelis, it's about survival in a hostile region. For Hamas, it's about power and control, not just over Gaza, but over the entire Palestinian cause. There are no easy solutions here. Each ceasefire offers only a temporary respite. Each negotiation seems doomed to fail. The world watches, leaders condemn the violence, and yet nothing changes. Every time the rockets fly, we wonder, Is this the one? Is this the moment that pushes this conflict into an all-out regional war? Each escalation feels like a step closer to the brink. What if one miscalculation spirals into something far more devastating?